I have a very important question to ask you. Have you checked out the Generally Spooky Patreon yet? Because if not, why not? We've got oodles of content over there, exclusive episodes only available on Patreon, our Wee Blethers, the chatty, unscripted weekly show where Kieran and I discuss episodes, what's going on with us, and generally have a great time. There's also the Spooky Book Club, where you'll get a chapter a week of a spooky classic. At the moment, we're in the middle of The Turn of the Screw by Henry James, and I am dying to know how it ends. As well as all that goodness, joining our Patreon is really what keeps the podcast going. It allows us to keep doing what we love, which is chatting to all of you about spooky Scottish history. You're £75 a month. No, I'm just kidding. You can pay £4, £8 or £12 a month to keep the lights on and keep the creepy cogs turning. So come join in. Search Generally Spooky Patreon or click on the link in our description. We have some very exciting news. We've partnered with the National Trust for Scotland. Joining the Trust with one of their memberships helps to preserve and protect the many amazing, historical and significant sites across Scotland for future generations. Your membership gets you free access to all 500 National Trust locations across the country, as well as free parking. And who doesn't love free parking? A National Trust for Scotland membership is ideal for days out with the family or for saving money on that tour across Scotland that you're taking for your holidays to see all the generally spooky sites, like Culloden Battlefield, Culzean Castle and Glencoe National Nature Reserve. Use the link in our description to get your Trust membership, and you'll be preserving Scotland's history as well as supporting us here at the podcast. Thank you, and happy travels!
Here we are again. Hello, everybody.
We're back with the second part of our two-parter on Dunrobin Castle.
Yes, we are.
We are the Generally Spooky podcast.
We are indeed.
If you're joining us new, you should probably listen to the last episode because this might not make a lot of sense.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
But we are happy that you are here.
Yeah, we are.
That's Kieran.
Hi. That's
I'm
Eilidh.
Eilidh.
I was speaking.
I just assumed you wouldn't introduce me.
Harsh.
Yeah, this is our second part.
Yes.
In our second two-parter ever.
The second.
On Dunrobin Castle.
I know. So, where did we leave off?
Well, I have the point in my script.
Mm-hmm.
Did you guys know these are scripted? I didn't.
I'm not scripted. Perhaps that's clear.
Oh, he is. That's the bad thing. Everything that Kieran says is scripted.
Do you know how hard I was cringing at the, to keep your money, don't lose your money? Oh, am I days.
We talked about that at length while Kieran was editing.
Such an idiot.
And this was only yesterday and the day before.
Yeah, this is Friday. We recorded on Wednesday.
Yeah.
I edited on Thursday, and now we're recording today.
So it's still fresh in your mind.
Yep. What I was trying to say is that to keep your money, you take advantage of compound interest. But that's not what I said.
It's not what you said.
That's not even almost what I said.
It was in your brain, it didn't come out your mouth.
No, that's what happened there. But anyway...
Let us know your favourite moments from the first part of Dunrobin Castle.
Your cringiest Kieran's unscripted moments.
I think mine was talking about being not a complete idiot, but probably of weak intelligence. I've been working on making that a t-shirt design. I did that last night. I didn't even tell you.
Did you?
I've been trying to put it together, yeah.
Nice.
Mainly because I want it on a t-shirt. I think it would be funny.
I think so. Anyway, I forgot what we were saying. You were talking about being scripted. You had a note in your script, that's what.
Yes, I know where we left off, and I thought I would just repeat a little bit, not saying the same thing, but repeat a little bit of the end of last episode, get you in the mindset, and then we push forward. Sounds
good to me, because we had Countess Elizabeth.
Yes.
Has just passed away.
Yes, that's where we are.
Yeah, that's what I've got in my brain.
Yes, so Elizabeth and Adam became Countess and Earl of Sutherland when her brother was deemed unfit to manage his own affairs and then died very suddenly.
Yes, because he was an idiot in the medical definition.
Not a complete idiot. But her claim was contested by her brother, who was defeated in battle. And we left things off with her son, who was called Alexander Gordon.
Yes, who had a rather interesting wife.
Yes. I've been dying to tell you about her.
I'm excited to hear it.
So yeah, Alexander, not very interesting. He fought in some battles. Fine. But his wife is the far more interesting of the pair. And she's only tangentially linked to Dunrobin Castle, but we're talking about her anyway.
I mean, that's why this is a two-parter.
Yes.
Gave us all the room to talk about stuff like this.
Exactly. And I didn't want to save her story for an extra episode because I just want everyone to hear it. So Alexander Gordon, who's Elizabeth's son, he married a woman called Janet Stewart. And the two of them had 5 children together.
Very good, very good.
So they did what they were supposed to do because he's the Earl and he needs to have children. But Alexander died when he was pretty young. I think he was only about 25 when he died.
Oh, wow.
And I don't know what he died of, but this is the 1500s, so it could be anything.
Literally anything, yeah.
But Janet Stewart was some lady. She didn't let the death of her first husband slow her down.
Eilidh says that to people about me.
Yeah, Kieran's my first husband. Janet was the daughter of the Earl of Athol. So she already came from an important and powerful family and on her own, or in her own right. And her grandfather had been the Earl of Argyll, which was a really prestigious title.
Okay.
And that's in the Campbell land. We've talked about that before. They're all marrying together to make sure they all keep their money.
Yep.
You know how it goes. And like I said, sorry?
Keeping it in the family.
Yeah, it's kind of icky. And like I said, Alexander was Janet's first husband. After his death, she was still referred to for at least some time as the mistress of Sutherland. And the rents and dues and things were, I don't want to say addressed to her, but they were owed to her. So when they were paid to the mistress of Sutherland.
Okay, that makes sense.
So she continued to have power. After Alexander, she married a man called Hugh Kennedy, who was fairly important. He had actually acted and gone against King James V in favour of Archibald Douglas, who was the Earl of Angus.
Okay.
We've talked about the Douglases before. There were 2 strains of Douglas. Makes them sound like a disease, but there were 2 different Douglas families. So these are the ones who became the Earl of Angus. And this Archibald Douglas, I think, had a claim on the throne. So Hugh Kennedy wanted Archibald as king, not King James.
Got you. I'm with you.
He's getting up to some dirty business. He ended up becoming a forgiven traitor because everything didn't go his way. King James was still King James. And Hugh Kennedy was a traitor, and then James said, it's fine.
Yeah, fair play. You had to
chill.
go. It's a bit of a strange concept, isn't it?
A little bit.
Yeah. So the Count has died, or the Earl, sorry.
Yes.
Where's the power gone? Does it go to his son?
Yes, but we're focusing on Janet.
Yeah, but if she remarries, who she marries doesn't become the Earl of Sutherland.
No, because they had a son.
Yes.
But I think he was still very young.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We'll get to that because I'll show you how the succession keeps going from here.
Got you.
So Hugh and Janet got married.
Yes.
But their marriage was dissolved.
Dissolved?
Yes.
Not divorced?
No.
Interesting.
So I think it being dissolved is more similar to an annulment.
Oh, okay.
I think. I don't know. We'll put a pin in that. There's Janet and Hugh. While she was either with him or separated from him, Margaret Tudor was an important figure in Scottish politics. I know this will feel like a bit of a right turn, but bear with me. She's around at this time. She had married James IV. We've talked about her before.
Yep.
James IV died at the Battle of Flodden in 1513.
Yep, that rings a bell.
And because of this, Margaret was besieged with people wanting to take power over her young son, James V.
Yep.
They wanted to be his regent and look after him and all of that. So she turned to the Douglas family to be her allies because they had all that power. Remember I was telling you they had all that power? But these were the same Douglases that Janet's husband Hugh had supported against her son later.
Oh, okay.
It's like we were saying before, nothing's ever static. Power's moving all the time and favour's moving all the time.
It's why you needed a book of who's who to keep up.
Yeah, because not everyone likes each other all of the time.
Yeah.
So Margaret turned to the Douglases and she made another marriage with them.
Yes.
To try and bring their protection in for her son.
Okay.
But her marriage with, I think, Archibald Douglas turned out to be awful. So she divorced him. And she married a man called Lord Henry Stewart of Methven.
Okay.
Or Methven. With me?
With you.
We don't need to keep track of all of this. You just need to know that she was the mother of the king, and then she married Lord Henry.
Yes, and that's also happening beside our countess's daughter.
In-law, yes.
Yes.
So it seems that Margaret, at least, was in love with Henry. She really cared about him, but she soon discovered that Henry was a shit. Margaret, mother of the king, very big deal and powerful woman, discovered that her husband was carrying on with a mistress.
Ugh, what a bastard.
Right? And this mistress was Janet Stewart.
Oh, shit. That's not how you gain anyone's favour.
See, this is why we had to take like a turn.
Well, we've just slapped back into the main story.
Yep.
Ooh, so Janet Stewart is now an enemy of the king's mother. Oh, no.
What made it worse was that Henry had been keeping Janet and like furnishing her. I don't even know the right word. He'd been keeping her at one of Margaret's castles.
Oh.
So she was living in one of Margaret's homes.
Cheeky.
So that they could be together.
Oh, no.
And they could rendezvous whenever they wanted. And she was living in this like, lap of luxury on Margaret's dime.
Oh. Did he think she wouldn't find out? Did he think he could just do whatever he wanted anyway?
I mean, there's no Twitter.
Well, that's true. He's not trending like Ned on Twitter.
Yeah. Guys, have you been following the Try Guys drama?
Oh my god, so much drama.
Mental.
Margaret
was furious that Henry had a mistress.
Yep.
And even though she begged for a divorce, she wasn't granted one.
Oh.
Because her son wouldn't allow it. He's the king.
Oh, no.
And he said no.
Oh, no. That's a shame.
One of the things I read was that Henry had bribed the king. Because if he isn't married to Margaret anymore, he loses a great deal of power.
Yep, that would make sense. I could see...
He was a lord in his own right as well.
Yeah, I could see why he wouldn't want to get divorced. Because, you know, he's got his mistress and all the power.
And by all accounts, he got on really well with King James. James had given him a lot of land and lots of, like, basically rewards for, like, loving his mother and making his mother so happy.
Okay, yes. And he's probably got a whole bunch of his own mistresses because he's the king and that's how these things go.
It's an accepted practice.
Yeah, so like, what's just like a little mistress? I've only got one. Like, you've only got one. How do you get by?
I've only got one this year.
Oh, well, if she's not allowed to get divorced, does, what's her name? Someone Stewart?
Janet.
Does Janet Stewart get to just keep living in Margaret's castle?
Well, Margaret dies.
Well, that's a shame.
That's how the situation is resolved. Margaret dies in 1541.
Oh.
And after that, Henry and Janet got married.
Well, that's nice.
Henry became Janet's third husband.
Damn. So she's making her way into some power. So she's the king's widowed stepdad's wife.
Yeah.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good going.
It's just mental.
Yeah.
Now, partly through her marriage to Henry, and partly due to her own power and influence, because she's been gathering it all over her lifetime, Janet actually became somewhat friendly with Mary, Queen of Scots.
Oh, very cool. Janet
sent the Queen some really beautiful golden cloth as a gift at one point. That was recorded, and Mary had this made into like mats or rugs for one of her bedchambers.
Very nice, very nice.
And Queen Mary had granted Janet and Henry some land in the past. So they were friendly and they were gifting each other things. Henry died in 1552.
Okay, yep.
So they were married for 11 years. And they had several children together. And after that, Janet married again.
So she had kids with her first husband.
Yes.
Who are the Earls?
Yes.
Or one
They're
of
the Sutherlands. So we're coming back to them after this brief interlude.
I just need to... So she married the first time, had some kids, got married again, that got dissolved.
Yes, I think they had children together though. I can't remember. I think they did.
And now she's been married to Mr. Douglas.
No. Margaret Tudor married a Douglas.
Oh. So who's the king's stepdad?
Henry. Lord Henry of Methven.
Oh, yes. So then she's married Henry.
Yep.
Had some more kids. Mm-hmm. And now she's on to man number 4.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Up to date.
This time, she married a man called Patrick Ruthven.
Okay.
Who we may have mentioned in our Mary Queen of Scots episode.
Sort of rings a bell.
She's gone from being a fairly good friend of the Queen to marrying a member of the band of men who murdered David Rizzio, who was Mary's personal secretary and one of her favourites, in front of her, along with her then husband, Lord Darnley, at a dinner.
Oh.
Patrick was one of the men who killed him.
Oh, no. Oh, her taste in men is getting poorer and poorer.
Well, and even, like, the betrayal.
Yeah. Ooh. Do you think she could just be like, nah, I didn't know about it?
I mean, probably.
I don't know. But... From adulterer to murderer.
I mean, she didn't murder anyone.
Her husband's.
Oh, yeah. Fair. More fair.
Oh, no.
Patrick Ruthven apparently, quote, died deceived by evil spirits who made him rave of a false vision of heaven, unquote.
That's not a common death certificate statement, is it?
No.
Can you imagine reading that in, like, the paper obituaries?
That would be quite frightening. So, yeah, it's a huge tangent, but when I started just trying to find some background information on Janet, I found this wealth of marriages. And I just couldn't... I think I mentioned it in the last one. I can't believe all of these glancing blows she's had off important figures of history.
I know. It's like she's just been standing there in all the paintings depicting these moments of history. I go, who's that woman in the background?
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm not really sure. Janet Stewart. Just standing in the background going, sup?
Yeah.
That's very cool.
So that's Janet Stewart, wife of Alexander Gordon.
Damn.
Now, Alexander and Janet's eldest son was John Gordon, and he became the 11th Earl of Sutherland.
Back to the Sutherlands.
Yeah, so that's where we're coming back to. They had children, and then that's how the line of succession went.
Yes. So what are the Sutherlands up to these days?
Well, John was actually present at the Parliament that rejected the Treaty of Greenwich.
Okay.
In 1543. He was still a minor at this time. I believe he wasn't fully a man. But this, I think we talked about it in the Mary Queen of Scots episode, but this was the plan that Henry VIII drew up, which proposed to marry his son to Mary. Okay. Because he wanted the Scottish crown. And this Parliament rejected the plan. John was there.
John was there. So he's also glancing some pretty important historic moments.
Yeah.
Damn. Trying to live up to his mother's name.
And that's what it was, this rejection and things that led to the rough wooing, which we talked about.
I remember the rough wooing.
So it was an important treaty. Another interesting tidbit for you. John married a woman called Elizabeth Campbell.
Okay.
Beautiful name.
Who's she? What's she got going on?
Well, before John, she had been married to an illegitimate son of King James IV.
Oh, I've always been curious how that works. As an illegitimate son of royalty, are you held in high regard?
Kind of, yeah. That's what it seems to be a lot of the time.
Yeah. You get to be in the thick of... Because you still have royal blood in you.
It counts for a lot.
That seems to be important.
But Elizabeth Campbell's aunt was a woman called Lady Catherine Campbell. Catherine was married to Lachlan MacLean of Dewart.
Sounds familiar.
This is the same Catherine Campbell who managed to survive a murder attempt by her husband in 1527, when she managed to not drown after he left her on a big rock.
On the rock! Oh my days.
So Elizabeth's uncle was Sir John Campbell of Codder, who we talked about just a few weeks ago.
Oh wow. I love when they link together. Brings me such joy. Amazing.
So yeah, that was her aunt that happened to.
Shit.
And then it was like her uncles were the like big Campbells of Argyll, and they're the ones who took revenge on what happened to her aunt.
Damn. And she's who married
John Gordon.
There you go.
Crazy, isn't it?
Super crazy.
I like when I can give you these things.
I enjoy them. I like having it all linked back together.
Now, around 1562, John actually found himself on the wrong side of the crown.
Uh-oh.
Which is a very dangerous place to be. Mary, Queen of Scots, had been trying to consolidate her power, but she'd come into conflict with the Earl of Huntly, who was John's cousin. Because if you remember, that's where the name Gordon came from. Adam Gordon came from the Earls of Huntly.
Yes.
So that's the connection back. And the Earl of Huntly now was John's cousin. And basically the Earl of Huntly had lost a lot of his land because Mary had given it to her half-brother.
Okay, yeah.
I believe. So he started battling with her about it, and he lost hard because he's fighting against the Queen's army.
That's a tough way to do it, isn't it?
But he was resentful that he had had his land taken off him.
Well, it's pretty brutal that the royals, whoever's king or queen, can just redistribute it. Like, yeah, I'm actually going to take yours and give it to this guy because he's better than you.
But he has his title at the graciousness of the Queen.
Yeah.
Because he's an earl because of the Queen. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, he gave it to... the Queen gave it to him.
Well, she allows him to have it.
Yeah, so she can take it away again. But it seems brutal that it's just, oh yeah, this other person has done good work as a loyal subject. They should be rewarded with some more land. I will just find some nearby and just take it. Like, fuck it, it's all mine anyway.
Literally.
And then I have the biggest army, so who's gonna fight me? Fucking fight me.
Fight me. Now, it was discovered that John Gordon had actually been sending information to Huntly about Mary's movements after she had made it to Inverness with her army.
Ooh.
So he had been telling on the Queen, and she didn't like it.
You wouldn't. That's fair.
No, he had been passing on information. So John had his lands and titles stripped from him, and he had to flee to France, otherwise he was going to be killed.
Oh man. It was a bold proposition to go against the crown.
But family.
You would for family.
It wasn't until 1565 that John was once again the Earl of Sutherland, and he had everything restored to him again.
How did he manage that?
The Queen forgave him. I don't know if anyone petitioned on his behalf or anything,
Maybe.
but she forgave him and he was allowed to return.
Oh, well, that's nice.
Well, it seems a bit shitty. He was invited to return to Scotland to come back home and resume his earldom. But in 1566, when he was on his way back home, he was captured and imprisoned in Berwick.
Well, that's strange.
And this happened without Mary's knowledge. She was livid when she found out that this had been done without her permission.
Oh, I see. That makes more sense.
Yeah, people had gone behind her back because he was deemed a threat to her reign. So
somebody else decided that he shouldn't be. Oh, shit.
And she was raging. So she ordered his release, especially because during his time in prison, he had become really unwell with a fever. And it looked like he might die there.
Oh, no.
And she had asked him to go back and be Earl.
Eee.
It's not good.
Not good at all. Crazy. Somebody else is just deciding this.
Yeah.
Well, see, that's how you lose favour. And oh, my God. Everyone just needs to behave themselves.
Mind the business that pays you.
Yeah.
So I said John had married Elizabeth Campbell. She had died, and he got married again to Lady Helen Stewart. Then she died, and he married a third wife called either Marie or Marion Seaton. But I'm going to call her Marie just for consistency's sake.
Sounds good to me.
Now, I believe that he and Marie were married before he was imprisoned, because they had a son together before he was incarcerated.
Got you.
I think he was born around 1552, so quite a bit before.
Yep.
Now, it's probably John's time for a quiet retirement in the Highlands, you might be thinking.
That'd be nice, wouldn't it?
Yes. But if you think that's what's going to happen to him, you're dead wrong.
If that's what happened to him, this would be a much shorter episode, and it's not.
No. John and Marie had a son together called Alexander Gordon. I'm not sure if he was John's only child, but he was his heir. So he was set to inherit Dunrobin. So either previous sons had died young, or he had only had daughters. And as we know, daughters can't possibly run things.
How could they?
They don't have a penis. So Alexander was set to inherit Dunrobin Castle and the earldom.
Yes. Xander baby.
Yes, big job. And in 1567, he was about 15 years old.
Okay.
John, Marie, and his son, Alexander, all went north after John had been released and all that stuff. They went north and visited Helmsdale Castle. And this was a family visit. They went to stay with Isabel Sinclair, who had married one of Elizabeth and Adam's sons. John was Isabel's husband's nephew.
Yes.
She was John's aunt.
Okay.
So they were going to go see her.
Where's Helmsdale?
Helmsdale's north of Brora, so it's on the east coast.
With you.
So it's not too far north of Golspie, where Dunrobin is. So it wouldn't have been too far.
Popping in to say, hello, auntie.
Now, Isabel was incredibly ambitious. She believed, because of this link that they had to the Sutherland estates, that her son should inherit Dunrobin.
Bold.
Not Alexander, and John and Marie shouldn't be there. It should be their family who are in control. Even though she had married a younger son of Elizabeth and Adam.
Yes.
So she felt that they had a good claim, and she wanted to make it happen.
Yes, I believe it should go to my son, because that would actually benefit me more.
Yeah, that would actually be great for me if we just had that castle.
Yeah, that would be great. So I'm just going to shout the loudest to make it happen. Or imagine it kind of like the argument between Joey and Ross and Friends. So, you see, the thing is, I think I should date her. Yes, interesting, because I actually think I should date her. And I should have Dunrobin Castle. Like, do you? Interesting.
That's pretty much it.
Yeah. Strange.
So you should have a bit of a ominous feeling about what's about to come.
I believe murder is coming.
Yes.
Murder.
That's going to be really creepy. John and Marie had dinner with Isabel on the 18th of June, 1567. Their son Alexander was running late. He wasn't there when they started the meal. But the rest of them sat down and they started to eat and drink as normal. But they both quickly realised that something was very, very wrong, because they both started feeling really, really ill.
Oh no.
Now that was when Alexander showed up at the meal, but before he could reach for his cup with wine, his mother, Marie, managed to divert him and very subtly warn him that she thought they'd been poisoned.
Oh, she can't even, say anything.
No, so she told him to run, basically, and go back to Dunrobin as fast as he could. He's 15.
15.
So she's telling him to run and get out. There's also a suggestion that when Alexander sat at the table with them all, his father, John, managed to pretend to knock Alexander's cup over so he couldn't drink anything.
Accidentally spilled it.
Yes.
Very nice.
And it should be said that Marie was also heavily pregnant at this time.
Oh. Well, that's a shame.
Yeah. Alexander managed to get away without being harmed, and he made it back to Dunrobin. But John and Marie weren't that lucky. They managed to basically take their leave. They left Helmsdale, but they died from poisoning at Dunrobin 5 days later.
Oh. Because what can you even do?
Unless you know what the poison is and you know the antidote, there's nothing you can do.
No.
And even then, it depends. There might not be an antidote.
Well, yeah, you're just going to have to wait and see what happens, won't you? Horrendous.
So Isabel had murdered them, and she had tried to poison Alexander too. And we know that she tried to do this because her attempt to kill him led to a terrible accident. Isabel's own son had appeared at the dinner, and despite his mum trying to stop him without saying as many words, he helped himself to a glass of wine and he downed the whole thing, not knowing that it was heavily dosed with poison.
Oh no.
And he died 2 days after the dinner.
Oh.
So she killed her own son.
Well, that's what you get, isn't it? And was that the son who she wanted to...
Yeah.
Oh, heavens. That's a bit bleak all round, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know how she's going to sleep at night for the rest of her days.
Well, she didn't have very many days left. She was arrested pretty quickly because it wasn't difficult to figure out what happened.
Not really, no.
Given that everyone knew where everyone had been.
Yeah.
Isabel tried to suggest that it hadn't been her idea.
Well, you would.
That it had been her brother and her cousin. And her cousin was the 4th Earl of Caithness. Remember, she's a Sinclair.
Yep.
We've talked about them before, and they've come up several times, these episodes. She claimed that they had told her to do it because they wanted the power.
They made me do it.
And that they had gotten the poison for her.
I can't imagine that claim held up.
No. She was sentenced to death.
Yeah.
For murdering the Earl and his wife and attempting to murder their son.
Yep.
Basically wipe out their family line.
How did she think she was going to get away with it?
I don't know. I guess if they had died quicker, she could have said there was some kind of accident, or she could have claimed that they left and then they just never made it back to Dunrobin.
Oh, yeah.
Because you could claim they were killed by robbers, you know?
Yeah.
She was tried in Edinburgh because this was a serious offence.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about that before as well. But before the execution could be carried out, because she was sentenced to death, she poisoned herself.
Oh. Strange.
And she had been sentenced to hang rather than being beheaded, even though she was noble.
Maybe that's why she poisoned herself.
Maybe.
Too mortified at the idea of being hung. Well, I kind of hoped she was going to, like, die of grief and regret at what she'd done.
No, completely on her own terms.
Well, what a bitch.
I told you there was going to be intrigue, betrayal and poison.
Well, that's 3 out of 3. That's bingo. That's number wang.
So yeah, that's a wrap for John and Marie.
Yep, that was all they wrote. And Xander Babies found himself quite young in not the throne, the earldom.
Well, yeah, you're right. Alexander remember he was 15 when this happened.
Mm-hmm.
He's now an orphan, but he's also the 12th Earl of Sutherland. He's inherited.
Filled with rage in his heart and betrayed by his own...
Yeah.
His aunt?
Yeah, his great aunt.
Great aunt.
It was his father's aunt.
Yeah, that's the one.
But yeah, by all accounts, he would have known what happened if his parents told him to flee.
Yes.
But now he has all of this power. He's very young. And generally, this is a situation that leads to some pretty shoddy behaviour.
Oh, it is actually, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. And even by standards of the podcast, what happened next is pretty vile.
Well, because he's old enough that he won't need a ward necessarily, will he?
Maybe, but he got one. Yeah, he was 15 when his parents were murdered.
Mm-hmm.
So older than some of the young nobles we've talked about.
Mm-hmm.
But George Sinclair, who was the 4th Earl of Caithness, Isabel's cousin, became Alexander's guardian.
Oh, no.
After it was his family that murdered Alexander's parents.
Who signed off on that one?
And in his infinite wisdom, as the Earl of Caithness,
Yep.
he forced Alexander to marry his daughter.
Okay.
A woman called Barbara Sinclair, who was more than twice Alexander's age. He forced them to get married because he had Alexander, I think it was one of his properties in Caithness, I can't remember where, he had to. So he was taking control of the Sutherland estate by marrying them together.
Well, that's pretty shitty, isn't it?
Isn't it?
Yeah.
And this was pretty immediately after he became his guardian. It was within 2 years.
First act of business. Marry you to one of my daughters.
So that I can take control of your family's land.
Well,
after my family murdered your parents in front of you, basically.
So, in a way, Isabel got what she wanted.
Kind of.
It's sort of adjacent to what she wanted, I'm sure.
Well, if she was telling the truth and her cousin had told her to do it, he got what he wanted.
That's true. I didn't even consider that maybe she was telling the truth.
If that was true. It may not have been. There isn't any proof.
Who knows?
No one at the time believed it. And yeah, Alexander was held by the Sinclair family for 2 years until 1569 when he managed to escape.
This has happened so often. It's just, who decided this was a good idea?
I think it's just who has the most influence gets what they want.
That's true, eh?
I think that's the moral of most of the stories we tell.
Yeah, you're probably like, well, this is a terrible idea for Alexander, but who gives a fuck about him? because this guy knows what's up.
Who cares about this sad orphan boy?
Little orphan boy. Go out onto the street, little orphan boy, beg for your dinner.
Like I said, Alexander did manage to escape, thankfully, because that's just torturous.
Thank God.
He managed to escape to Huntly Castle, because remember, they're related to the Huntleys.
Yes.
That's what his dad got exiled for.
That's a good bit away from Caithness.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, thankfully he had somewhere to go that wasn't owned by the people who killed his family.
Thankfully. I wonder who's at Dunrobin Castle. Like, who's taking care of things? Because there's all of Sutherland needs seen to.
Yeah, but it's not just the Earl. You have all of the people who work on the estate.
Yeah, I guess they can all just manage it without him.
You have people living on the estate as well. Like, people are managing their own affairs. You have tenants on the land, and it's not just the Earl running things.
I guess not. I'm forgetting how big Dunrobin Castle is.
It's not that big yet.
Oh, okay.
It's a castle, but it's not the current castle yet.
It's still the keep that you moved.
Yeah, that doesn't happen until the 1800s.
That makes sense.
So Alexander had been trying to get a divorce from Barbara now that he was safe.
Oh, Barbara, it's not you, it's me.
It was me being forced to marry you. And he didn't want the Sinclairs to have anything to do with the estate.
I think that's fair.
But before the divorce went through, Barbara died in 1573.
Oh, that's a shame.
And I don't think they were together. I think he escaped alone. Because she was older than him.
Yes.
So Alexander was free from them after that.
Good for him.
While he was staying at Huntly Castle before he went home, Alexander Gordon married a woman called Jean Gordon. Possibly related somewhere down the line. I've only just put that together that they have the same surname. But not directly related. I think she was... Oh, I'm going to tell you who she was. Jean had previously been married to the Earl of Bothwell, who we've talked about before.
Yes, I remember the Bothwells.
Another figure from our Mary Queen of Scots episode. The Earl of Bothwell had left his first wife, a woman called Anna Thronson, alone in Copenhagen. She had completely abandoned her. He had completely abandoned her so he could marry Jean.
He just left her in Copenhagen.
Yeah, and this was a move that basically sealed his fate later. Because Bothwell and Jean got divorced in 1567, which was the year Alexander's parents were murdered.
Okay.
On the grounds that Bothwell had cheated on her with one of their servants. However, only 8 days after their divorce, Bothwell married Mary Queen of Scots.
Yes.
As part of a very controversial and suspicious series of events.
Yep. I remember that.
Yeah, so after his marriage to Mary and everything went under, he ended up being imprisoned in Denmark. And one of the reasons was that he had abandoned his first wife, Anna.
I'm surprised she got by in the meantime.
Well, she had a powerful family in Denmark.
Oh, that makes more sense. I thought she was Scottish and he took her to Denmark and then just went home without her.
No, he married a Danish woman. I'm hope.
Fact check.
Yeah. So yeah, that was basically what sealed his doom at the end of his life. Because he had tried to flee there and they went, hold on, you're a dick.
We don't take kindly to your type around here.
So that's Jean. That's who Alexander married.
That's Jean. So is Jean Danish?
No, that's Anna, his first wife.
Yes.
Jean is his second wife.
Yes. And Mary Queen of Scots was his third wife.
Yes.
Yes, I'm with you.
So Jean and Alexander got married, and they seemed happier than they had been with their first spouses, if not actually in love.
What does that matter?
Which was the way of these things. And they ended up having about 7 children.
Oh, busy.
Their eldest child, a daughter, actually married the chief of Clan Mackay, maintaining peace between the two families.
That's a good idea, it would seem.
And another of their children was Robert Gordon, who I mentioned earlier. He was a historian who wrote a lot about the Sutherland family's history.
Yes.
So that's where he comes in. He's the son of one of the earls, so we can't really trust everything he says.
Yeah, I was wondering when that was going to come around again.
Yeah, this is where he's born. Alexander suffered from ill health for a good portion of his life.
No.
He was not a well man. So a good deal of the running of the Sutherland estate fell on Jean. And she supported him a lot, and eventually she was doing things on her own. Like all of the rents and dues were paid to her, not to him.
But how does she manage it?
I don't know. She doesn't have a penis, Kieran.
I know. Like, how is that possible that she's able to do that?
It's one of those urban things.
Yeah. Weird.
In 1580, so we're getting towards the 1600s now, Alexander actually gave the earldom to their son John, which suggests that he was really in quite bad health.
Yes.
And wanted to secure everything before anything happened to him.
That's a good shit.
Yeah, getting his affairs in order. And he died in 1594. Now, Jean married again after his death in 1599 to a man called Alexander Ogilvy, which is weird to me because her next husband has the same name as her old husband.
Yep.
Bit creepy.
A bit strange.
Yeah, a bit weird. She had two husbands that had the same name.
Yeah, a bit unusual, but
Alexander Ogilvy had previously been married to one of Mary, Queen of Scots' ladies-in-waiting.
Oh.
I don't know if you remember, we talked about the 4 Marys.
Oh, yeah,
She had 4 ladies-in-waiting, all called Mary. He was married to one of them.
Well, there you go. Strange. It's a strange concept, a lady-in-waiting.
Yeah. But Jean died in 1629, 33 years after Alexander died.
Wow. She must have got to a ripe old age.
Yeah, she was 83.
Wow. That'd be good going now, let alone in 15 to 1600s.
1629.
Damn.
And I said already, their son, John, inherited and became the 13th Earl of Sutherland.
Yes. In, the 1580s sometime? 1590?
1580.
1580, yeah.
But he sort of became the Earl officially after his father's death, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense.
There's not really much to say about John. He's not particularly interesting, other than the fact that he sailed to Orkney to visit Patrick Stewart, who was the second Earl of Orkney, not a spaceman. We've actually talked about Patrick before on the podcast. I think it was during the Scale House episode or the Roslyn episode. But he was an awful, awful person. He made the people living in Orkney miserable, so much that he was actually investigated and brought to court over how badly he was treating his tenants and his people.
Oh no.
And later he staged a rebellion against King James V. I think King James V, which failed, and he tried to blame his son, and then he was executed for treason. But his execution was delayed because he was too ignorant to recite the Lord's Prayer.
That was a roller coaster.
Yeah. It's because he's not related to our story, and we've talked about him before.
Yep. So our current Earl, John, went to see him.
Yeah, he visited him after sailing to Orkney one time. That's really the only thing of note.
13th Earl of Sutherland, boring John.
Kinda, yeah. He married a woman called Agnes Elphinston, and the wedding was a pretty big deal. King James VI and his wife Anne of Denmark came to the wedding.
Damn.
And gave Agnes a bunch of expensive jewellery as a wedding gift.
Very nice.
So, they were important, but there's not really anything we would want to talk about.
Yeah, that's fair.
If that makes sense.
It does indeed. I wonder, do all the earls and everyone invite the king to their wedding? Or do you only invite him if he's going to come? Or does he invite himself?
Well, that's what I wondered. I wondered if you don't invite him, but he just decides whether or not he's going.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Because I feel it might be rude not to invite him.
Yeah.
But maybe if the wrong person invited him, that would probably also be rude.
Maybe there's a system where someone with a title like that can't marry without his permission.
Oh, maybe. That would make sense.
Anyway, John and Agnes had 4 children, and one of their daughters actually died in a shipwreck.
Oh, that's a rough way to go.
So when John died in 1615, it was his eldest son, John, who took over and became Earl number 14.
Taking over from boring John?
Yeah. This John was a staunch Covenanter.
Oh, okay.
We've talked about the Covenanters before, which I'm not getting into now. But he fought at the Battle of Aldern, not far from here, in 1645, against the Royalists. Because he was on the side of the Covenanters.
And lost, I believe. Did they lose?
Yes, I think so.
I seem to remember they lost quite badly.
I think so. He was later made the Keeper of the Privy Seal, which was very, very important.
It's a pretty cool title.
And he married the daughter of the Earl of Perth, a woman called Lady Jean Drummond.
Very good, very good. Good for him.
Yeah, cool. Sadly, their eldest son, who was set to inherit, died of smallpox, which was still rife. One of the medical marvels of humanity, that smallpox no longer exists.
Yep.
Get vaccinated. So their next son, George, became the 15th Earl.
Wait. How can he be Earl if he's not called John?
I know. Well, I mean, they fixed it because he didn't really do much, and then his son John became the 16th Earl.
Oh, thank God.
So they fixed it.
Yeah. Whew. That's what you get. That's what you get.
This Earl, John, was in favour of the Glorious Revolution of 1688. Now, do you remember what the Glorious Revolution was?
I do not.
This was when King William and Queen Mary were invited to just take the throne of Britain.
Oh.
Because the government didn't like the religion of the current king.
Yes.
So they sent away King James.
Ah.
Do you see the point of history we're getting close to now?
I do. There's something Jacobean in the air.
Yes. John became a privy councillor during the reign of Queen Anne, and later, in 1715, he actually helped quash the Jacobite rebellion.
Uh-oh.
Because remember, it wasn't just 1745.
Mm-hmm.
There was an earlier Jacobite rising in 1715.
Yes. I remember that. I remember.
So he helped to crush the Jacobites way back before Culloden ever happened.
He did it before it was cool.
Yeah. John was greatly rewarded for his services to the crown during this time for defeating the Jacobites. Mm-hmm. He fought in the Battle of Glen Shiel, and he led his men to defeat the Jacobites during that battle. And this was the only battle in which the Jacobites didn't use the Highland charge.
Oh.
I read it was something to do with the layout of the land where they were fighting. They couldn't do it. I think it was quite hilly.
Yeah.
And during this rising, I won't get into detail, now isn't the time, the Jacobites were backed by Spain because it was in Spain's interest to weaken the British forces.
Got you.
So they were supporting them to create disruption so that the British army would be divided.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's really all you need to know for this episode.
Mm-hmm.
Now, John is actually the one who abandoned the surname Gordon in favour of Sutherland.
Oh.
So we're back to Sutherlands now.
Yeah.
Because remember, there was a big hoo-ha when the Gordons took over way back when.
Yep.
And I read he did this so that he could be chief of Clan Sutherland.
Ah.
Which we talked about before.
Yep, that makes sense. It's weird that you'd be like, yeah, I'm just going to do this. And now I'm chief. So everybody bow to me.
Yes, now I actually have all of the power, so you have to be nice to me.
You have to be nice to me.
Now, it was assumed that his son William would be his heir upon his death. And William was better known as Lord Strathnaver.
Okay.
And I think it's because he entered the realm of politics, and that was his title. He was a lord.
Yep.
Strathnaver isn't far from like Golspie, it's within Sutherland. From here on out, I'm not going to mention it every time, but basically from here, most of the Sutherlands, if not all, are members of Parliament and then members of the House of Lords when they inherit their title.
Ah, yes.
Because you can't be both. It was only in the 1700s that they decided it would be inappropriate to be an MP, so an elected official, and a lord in the House of Lords.
Yeah, it seems quite straightforward.
You would think.
Yep.
Because the House of Lords are hereditary titles. They're not elected.
Yeah.
But they thought up until then it was totally fine for them to be an MP and a lord. But yeah, lots of them were involved in politics. They were MPs. I think 99% of them, if not all of them, were Tories. They were part of the Conservative Party.
Yeah.
But I'm just not going to say it every time because it'll just get boring.
Yeah.
Strathnaver married a woman called Catherine Morrison. He was an MP, like I said. He was an army man. He was a colonel and he led a regiment in Flanders in France.
Oh.
And he also fought against the Jacobites in 1715 because he's the Earl's son. So he's quite young. He's of fighting age. Now, he spat the dummy when he didn't get the promotion he wanted.
Oh.
Because he was like quite old for a colonel. He had served for a long time. So he felt he was due a promotion. He didn't get one. So then he tried to get his dad to intervene to get him one. Because he's the Earl.
Yeah.
And he still didn't get one.
I'm glad.
Yeah. And he became so enraged at the fact he didn't get a promotion, he sold his command.
Well, I was just about to say, I bet his coloneldom was bought for him.
I don't know if it was initially bought for him. We talked about this in our Leith Hall episode.
I think it was a Leith Hall one, yeah.
But he sold the position because he didn't want to be in the army anymore because he wasn't getting promoted.
That's so weird. Like, right, who else wants to be colonel? It's up for sale. No experience required. You just have to have some money.
Isn't it crazy?
Crazy. Ugh.
But William died in 1719 of consumption.
Of consumption?
Yeah, I believe it's TB.
Oh.
You know in like period pieces where they start coughing up blood into a hanky?
Oh, yeah.
That's consumption.
Ah, he didn't just eat himself to death.
No. No. But he died before his father, so he never became Earl.
Ugh, no Colonel Major, no Earldom. What's even the point?
I know. William's eldest son, so John's grandson, died just a few months after him.
Oh, that's a shame.
So John's left, his eldest son is dead, his eldest grandson is dead. And then he dies in 1733.
Ooh, where are we going to go?
Well, it was William's second son, William. He became the Earl.
It's interesting it goes to, or it would have gone to his son's son before his second son.
I don't know if he had a second son, but it definitely would have happened before a daughter.
Yeah. Well, you were saying that's who's got it, William.
Yeah, so that's John's grandson, but not his eldest grandson.
Oh, I see.
With me?
Yeah.
So you have John at the top. His oldest son is William, who's the arsehole colonel. And William has his children. But his oldest son is dead. But his second son is still living.
Gotcha.
So he becomes the Earl.
Yes.
The 17th Earl.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
Have we been firing through them from 12 to 17?
I mean, I'm trying. There's a lot of them.
We're getting there.
And it's hard to keep track because they all have the same fucking name.
They are all John or William.
So this William was the Earl of Sutherland during the Jacobite Rising of 1745.
Yes. Now, will he go with his family and be anti-Jacobites?
Well, it's the question on everybody's mind when you hear someone had a position of power during that time, isn't it? Were you a Jacobite or not?
Yeah.
Before he even got to Culloden or anything like that, he had a bit of a dodgy reputation. There's documents that show that he was caught claiming money for arms that had supposedly been surrendered to him by the Highlanders. But the receipts that he had written for these were very suspicious.
Interesting.
So it seemed like he was doing this fraudulently. And arms were being handed in by the Highlanders because there was the Act of Disarming in 1730 that meant Highlanders couldn't have weapons.
Yes.
Because they were trying to stop another rising, but it didn't work.
Yep.
With me?
I'm with you.
Sutherland supported the British government and King George during the rising. So he was against the Jacobites, as you would expect.
Be a bit of a turn if he was a Jacobite.
From everything we know of the family so far, yeah.
Yeah, like there's being a rebellious son, and then there's just turning your whole religion and beliefs around royalty around.
So Sutherland actually raised 2 regiments to fight for the government during this Jacobite rising. And during the conflict, Dunrobin Castle was actually stormed by Jacobites.
Really?
Yeah. And it was so sudden, they didn't have any warning. William was at the castle at the time.
Fuck.
And there was no time to make any kind of arrangements or defence. So William had to climb out a back window of the castle to escape.
Oh, shit.
And he just had to run.
Just bailed.
And he managed to get away eventually by boat.
Fuck.
That's what saved him. And he joined the Duke of Cumberland's army.
Oh, shit.
After having to flee his castle.
So that then he have to retake his castle?
I think it was retaken without him, but I can't remember.
Yeah.
I think they were storming it mainly to get at him, so I don't know how keen they were on keeping the castle.
That makes sense.
But yeah, they stormed it and very nearly got him.
Climbed out a window. Oh.
Yeah, had to bolt. That's how close they got.
Gotta check your exits.
Now, William was at the Battle of Culloden.
Oh.
He fought that day. And again, that's probably what's on everyone's mind when you hear that he was fighting against the Jacobites. But it seems like even though he had gathered all these men to fight for the government, he was at Culloden, he'd been attacked by Jacobites. There were a lot of people on the government side who doubted whether he was actually in support of King George.
Really?
A lot of people thought that he was a secret Jacobite.
Oh, man. I mean, that's a very secret Jacobite. That's some, like, in-the-closet Jacobite right there.
But he had to answer lots of questions, and there were lots of accusations thrown around.
Damn.
A lot of people thought that he was, even though he had done all of this.
I wonder if he had a painting in his house with water in it.
Maybe.
And then they're like, that's a secret Jacobite signal, that is. And he's like, no, that's just a painting.
In 1747, after the rising had been squashed, Sutherland wrote to the Duke of Newcastle. What did he write for?
Pardon, because he was terrible in battle.
It's a good guess.
He was just absolutely shite at Culloden. And he went, it's not because I'm a Jacobite, it's just because I'm shite.
It's because I've never had any experience. I bought my command.
Yeah.
He wrote to the Duke of Newcastle for money. He was really upset for what he had lost during the Jacobite rising, and he wanted compensation.
Okay.
For everything that he had lost.
Oh, I can't see that going well.
I think he got something. I think that was the done thing for people who had supported the king.
Well, that's true.
But imagine after all of that death and everything happening in your back garden, because he's in the Highlands, and then writing like, oh, I've lost all of this money and I'm already super wealthy. I'm so hard done by.
I want more money.
When Highland life was decimated. Yeah.
Not when you're sitting pretty in your castle.
It's in poor taste.
Very poor taste. I was forced to flee out my back window. Have you been forced to flee out your back window? Do you need compensation?
That's happened to me more times than I can count. William died in France in 1750, leaving piles and piles of debt.
Oh. Well, this is generally where things start going downhill, once there's a big pile of debt left for somebody.
Yeah. Yeah.
Going from the historical episodes talking about castles. Ooh. How did he acquire all this debt, do you know? I'm
not too sure. There was lots of mortgages taken out on Sutherland land. And they're called wad sets, and I don't really know what that means. I think it's an old type of mortgage. But basically he had taken out all these mortgages on his land to do stuff. I don't know.
Stuff.
And he couldn't pay it back. So he died with all of these mortgages outstanding. And yeah, things are going downhill from here, believe you me.
Ooh.
So William's left all of this debt.
Yes.
And his son, William, became the 18th Earl.
Okay.
Now, this new William had been born in 1735, so he wasn't involved in the rising in any way. But this William married a woman called Mary Maxwell, who was an English noblewoman. So they're making a lot of connections south of the border.
It's kind of
from here.
Reaffirming their royalist the government side and things.
And it's probably more lucrative, because remember, they're in politics, so it's the English Parliament.
That's true.
So that's where the money is, and that's where the prestige is, so they're kind of moving their pieces further south.
Yeah.
They still have Dunrobin, but they're broadening their horizons.
Yes, hopefully she was fabulously wealthy.
Well, yes, she came from a noble family, but William and Mary only had one child together.
How selfish of them.
And she was a girl.
Oh no, not a girl.
And what's weird is she's only the second female heir that we've spoken about, but she was also called Elizabeth.
Oh, that's funny. On purpose?
I don't know.
Don't know.
Now, her father died when he was only 31. She was about a year old at the time, Elizabeth. He died very young. So she was set to inherit, and her father had died young. So she became the 19th Countess of Sutherland at a very young age.
Oh. I just naturally assumed it would go to a more distant male relative.
Well, once again, her inheritance was contested.
Yep, there we go.
Just like it was with the other Elizabeth. Because she's a woman, and it's the only time that it's contested. You have all these people coming, or these men, not people, men, coming in and suggesting that even though they are further down the line of succession, they deserve it because she's a woman.
Ugh.
And one of the men who did this was Robert Gordon, the historian.
Oh, what?
Yep.
He's still about?
Yep, he contested her claim. He felt he had a better claim than she did.
Disgusting. Hard to argue with a 1-year-old.
And then there was another claimant called George Sutherland, who was descended from the 5th Earl, down a different line. He also contested that he was better suited than she was, even though she was the only child of the heir, of the Earl.
Oh, it's just the worst. Fucking men.
And it's the only time.
Yep. Blech. Well, I hope she wins. Or someone wins. Her mum wins, I guess.
She does. She stayed Countess of Sutherland. It was taken to the House of Lords. And it was decided in 1771 that she was the Countess of Sutherland and they couldn't dispute it anymore.
Fair play.
Unfortunately, though, because this in itself is great, that she has the power.
Yeah.
Not them.
I'm surprised it didn't go elsewhere.
And it took 5 years for it to be settled. Like, she's 5 at this time.
Oh my god.
Or 5 or 6. She's managed to beat them out, or whoever's fighting on her behalf. Unfortunately, though, this is not what she is known for.
Oh.
And we're getting to the point in Dunrobin's story that if you've heard anything about the castle, this is probably what you know it for.
Okay.
Because we're going to be talking about the infamous Duke and Duchess of Sutherland. This title hasn't existed before now.
Yes. Does the Duke of Sutherland have a statue?
Yes, we're getting to it.
Yes.
You know what I'm talking about.
I do know what you're talking about.
So I mentioned to you that Elizabeth's father died young, and the same fate ended up befalling her mother.
Oh.
They both died of typhus when Elizabeth was only 1 year old.
Doesn't sound good.
No, typhus is an awful disease. It was called putrid fever. That was another name for it. I think it was a waterborne disease. Typhus. So they both died. So she was left with no parents. She was raised in Edinburgh and London by like different guardians and people, and eventually married a man called George Granville Levison Gower.
Well, that's easy for you to say.
Yes. Now, George was the Viscount Trentham. And Viscount is an important title. So he was in the English nobility.
It's also a nice biscuit.
A Viscount.
Yeah, well, like the mint.
The mint one. Oh, it has to be the mint ones.
Yeah.
They got married in 1785.
You can tell I'm not part of the nobility.
No, you're talking about biscuits. I'm not going to get into the details of all of the titles and things he had, but George was incredibly powerful.
Yes.
He became a marquess after his father died. And a marquess is above an earl, but below a duke.
Interesting.
So it's like 2 away from a prince, I think.
Damn.
So very important, very, very wealthy. Elizabeth had already inherited the Sutherland estate before she got married. But after she got married, it effectively all belonged to her husband, because that was the law.
Yeah.
Until more recently than you would like to believe.
Yeah.
But the contract was written slightly differently, their marriage contract.
Interesting.
So it's kind of like a prenup. George controlled the estate, so he had final say over what happened across Sutherland. But he would never own it as long as Elizabeth was alive.
Oh, okay.
So he could control what happened on it, but she owned it.
Yeah, I guess that's to stop him divorcing her and then keeping it.
Yes, I think so.
Amongst other things. But
that was the contract, which I thought was unusual. It didn't just blanket belong to him.
Yeah, that's better, I suppose.
In the 1790s, Elizabeth gathered men from Sutherland to fight against the Irish Rebellion.
Oh, yeah.
So she was really shitting on everyone that just doesn't want to be ruled by Britain.
Yeah.
That's what they were trying to throw off in Ireland at the time.
Which is everybody who's ruled by Britain.
Pretty much, yep.
Including Scotland.
Yeah. Bring on independence, 2023. Elizabeth, as well as inheriting the estate, she inherited her grandfather's debt.
Oh, I'd already forgotten about the debt.
Remember?
Yeah.
There were lots of mortgages. And she, for a time, actually made all of this debt worse because she used the estate and the money from it to fund the time that she and her husband spent in Paris.
Very nice.
George was a diplomat there for a while. And I don't know if you know much about it, but they were in Paris and in France when the revolution broke out.
Oh.
Which was not a good time to be in the aristocracy in France.
No, absolutely not.
So they actually had a hard time getting home. It was very dangerous.
Yeah.
But they managed eventually.
Well, that's good. It's the weird thing that if you're rich enough, debt doesn't matter.
Yeah, kind of.
You can just be... Because, yeah, once you're rich enough, it's called being leveraged.
Yeah. Well, I think they were helped by the fact that Elizabeth had married George, who had a lot of money. So it kind of evened out.
Yeah, their net worth averaged up.
Now, despite all of the debt, Elizabeth actually became a darling of the London social scene.
Oh, darling.
She threw really lavish parties and she was hobnobbing with the British elite, read as the English elite. She was actually, I read a quite mean description that was saying that the men down in the London social circuit thought she was amazing, that she was beautiful and charming and elegant and all this stuff. But the women hated her.
Oh, no.
And thought she was overbearing.
Oh, well, that's a shame.
Which I think is just kind of mean. I think it builds on that stereotype where women hate each other. And it's not true.
It's just a shame, isn't it?
Yeah. But it wasn't her parties that made Elizabeth famous. Just like it wasn't her inheritance that made Elizabeth famous.
Was it a very large nose?
No, it was the part that she played in the Highland Clearances.
Yes. I would have preferred mine.
Yeah. We're getting to the painful part of the episode for me.
Yeah.
We would need an entire, possibly another 2-parter episode to cover the Highland Clearances. I'm going to just touch on it in the way that it relates to Elizabeth for this episode.
I don't think we've gone into it much before now.
No, we haven't. And I've done that on purpose because we would need to do it properly. If you want more information, I would recommend a book by James Hunter called Set Adrift Upon the World, The Sutherland Clearances. He's a brilliant writer, would highly recommend. But we're going to talk about it a little bit here in terms of what happened on her land.
She owns it.
Elizabeth played a pretty major role in the clearances, and if you don't know, the clearances were the process of removing tenants from estate lands across the Highlands and replacing them with sheep farms, because landowners could charge more rent and make more money because wool prices were really high. So you could make more money from having sheep than you did from having people who were farming, like they had crofts. The people who were cleared were either moved closer to the coast and had to uproot their entire lives, change their jobs completely, or they moved somewhere else entirely, whether it was a neighbouring estate, a different estate in another part of the country, or they emigrated to a different part of the world.
Huge amounts of emigration at the time, I believe.
Yes, which is why if you're listening to this from a different country and you have a Scottish surname, that might be one of the ways that you received it.
Yep.
Quite possibly. Because there was a huge number of people who moved out of the Highlands during this time.
Yes. Particularly to America and Canada, I think.
Yes, but other places too.
Not solely there, but...
This was all happening from around 1790, somewhere earlier. I think the Sutherland Clearances started properly 1790, until the mid-1800s. And some clearances were happening sort of 1770 and around then. So it's a large chunk of time. And yeah, it's just people losing their homes and being forced off their ancestral land and losing their entire way of life.
For sheep.
For sheep.
It's very sad.
Yes, very. What's quite eerie is that if you travel around the Highlands, you can still see the scars of the clearances, because a lot of the ruined homes are still standing.
Yeah.
Old run rigs. The run rig was the farming system. They're still there.
I was about to say the old run rigs were quite common.
And they've just been abandoned because the people had to leave.
You can see the old walls dividing them. A lot of the houses are bothies now, I think.
Yeah. We're going to talk a bit about why these ruins are still there in a bit. People started being cleared from the Sutherland estate when Elizabeth was just a child. So she wasn't responsible for the initial clearances because she couldn't have made those decisions.
Yep.
But she continued this practice as she got older and it's what she and her husband are known for. The process of clearing people was kind of slow across Sutherland because of all of the debt. They were strapped for cash, and they had planned to create new communities for people to live in, to farm or fish. But to build these new homes, they needed money, which they didn't have. So they had to make money to build new homes before they could clear people out of the old homes.
Yes, but to make money, they had to clear people out of their homes to get sheep, presumably.
Potentially. But in 1803, Elizabeth's husband George inherited a massive fortune from like the Duke of Bridgewater, I think his name was.
Sounds good.
So they inherited an unimaginable amount of money, and they used this to finance their plans.
Oh.
They now had the cash to do it.
Well, that's good.
But although George was the one who was bringing the cash, Elizabeth was the one who was largely in control of the Sutherland estate. He sort of let her get on with it.
Yeah.
He didn't take too much to do with it. So these were largely her plans and her decisions.
Yeah. Seemed unusual.
Yeah.
He was obviously busy hobnobbing down south.
Yeah. Well, he had lots of different titles and lots of different properties and a vast fortune.
I kind of imagine, although to me the Sutherland is a huge area, it's probably just like a bit of a hobby for him.
Yeah, it's kind of their summer home.
Yeah. Like if they're spending all their time down south in politics, hobnobbing.
Well, in London.
Yes.
They had, it's a place called Stafford House, and it was this palace-sized home in the centre of London.
Yeah, if you're down there doing that, you don't really care about your farmland in the north of Scotland, do you?
You just want it to be profitable.
Yeah, you'll care about it in that sense.
So the first big sheep farm was let in 1807. It was in Lairg, which is within Sutherland, and in order to establish this sheep farm, 300 families had to be cleared off the land.
So many. So many.
Mm-hmm. Naturally, lots of people were upset and angry at this decision because they didn't want to leave their homes.
No.
They didn't want to leave everything behind, but they're tenants on the land. So they don't own their own land. That was the system.
Yeah.
So there's not really much they could do. And they didn't want new professions and new homes. They wanted their homes.
Well, they were farmers.
This wasn't their choice. Well, it was proposed they were moving towards the coast and starting new farms or becoming fishermen. So a lot of fishing villages were built.
That makes sense.
But it's completely changing their way of life.
Yeah, a lot more dangerous fishing as well.
Yeah, well, especially if you don't know what you're doing.
Well, yeah.
So you have the fishing villages, and the Sutherlands, they even built a coal mine near Brora.
Wow. As
a form of employment for the people they were clearing. It was a huge operation that they were doing.
Crazy.
I can't even do it fully justice in this episode because it would be a 3-4 parter, you know?
I didn't realise that they sought other employment for their tenants.
Well, we're going to talk about that later because this didn't happen universally.
Yeah, because I was under the impression it was more just get out, fend for yourself, I don't care.
That did happen. But we are going to talk about that being a weird detail.
Yes.
We will get to it.
We're replacing you with the sheeps.
Yeah. Elizabeth employed 2 new factors to help with the clearing of tenants. And a factor was basically someone who ran the estate for the landowner. And they were called William Young and Patrick Seller. And she employed them in 1809. And they were basically advising Elizabeth on what should be done.
Sounds like a law firm, Young and Sellers.
Yeah, kind of. They even have that vibe. But they were advising her, and then they were tasked with carrying out her plans. So in 1812, they started clearing people off the land. That was their job. The unpopularity of all these changes was growing over time. Yes. So initially people were moving. They weren't happy about it, but they were just leaving. But in 1813, riots broke out when people were made to clear the Strath of Kildonan, which is north of Brora. The people living there actually drove the sheep farmers who were coming to view the land away. They wouldn't let them near it. They formed this big barrier. They wouldn't let them come on their land. They were refusing to leave.
Good for them.
This standoff lasted for about 6 weeks.
6 weeks?
Yeah.
Damn.
But eventually, the people were offered high prices for their cattle by the estate. They were buying their cattle off them for a higher rate. They were given homes in neighbouring estates, neighbouring areas if they wanted them, and some of these people emigrated to Canada.
Well, at least they fought for more of the value they deserved.
Yeah.
If not for what they wanted.
But they couldn't hold out.
No.
The army were brought in to assist clearing them.
Well, what are you going to do?
It would be a big decision to decide you were going to die for your home.
Yeah.
That's not something you take on lightly. Especially when it's your whole family.
Yep.
It's not even just you. Now, I should say that Elizabeth and others of the time genuinely felt that what they were doing was doing their tenants a favour.
I wondered.
They really felt that they were offering them a better way of life because they were looking at the Runrig system. And remember, this is a time of, like, we're getting towards Industrial Revolution. We're not quite there yet, but we're getting there. So technology is advancing. Elizabeth and other landowners are looking at the Runrig system and they don't see it as being sustainable.
Yeah.
So they're offering them a new life. The estate's going to make more money. So when they experienced pushback from the people that they were helping, Elizabeth and the others like her were genuinely shocked.
I bet. They always are, aren't they? It was hard going on some people, the Runrig system and things.
Yeah, absolutely. If you got bad land, you might starve.
And I was reading about the Runrigs, and they used to like change hands, and you'd like cycle through them.
Yeah.
And there somewhere had 5 main Runrigs that you got allotted and then changed through, and you spent like 5 years on the land. But one of them, it was just horrible ground, and nobody ever managed to grow anything there. So the guy on that one murdered one of the other tenants, and then got sentenced to jail and things.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't a perfect system.
No.
But people were being forcibly evicted from their homes.
Well, yeah, if you choose to leave it, that's different than someone choosing what's best for you.
Yeah. Now, one of many points that I found dodgy across this whole saga was Seller, one of the factors. He was, telling her what a great idea it is to move everyone away. He's helping clear people. He bought one of the sheep farms.
There you go, yep.
So he's directly profiting from moving these people from the land, even though he's supposed to be like an objective advisor.
Totally impartial. Horrendous.
But Seller made a somewhat formidable enemy at this time.
Oh?
A man called Robert McKidd. And Robert was the local law officer. And in what I feel is like true Highlander fashion, Seller caught Robert, the law officer, poaching Sutherland salmon.
Nice.
And the impression I got is that Seller turned him in, or he ratted on him, or at the very least he was holding it over his head that he'd been caught. And McKidd hated him from then on because he'd caught him.
That is how you'd make an enemy, isn't it?
So bear this in mind.
Okay.
They don't get on. Things basically got worse. In 1814, 430 families were cleared from Strathnaver and Brora.
So many.
Around 2,000 people.
Oh my God.
Oh, and around this time, 1812 to 1816, Elizabeth and George were buying up even more land than they'd had already. They bought so much land that they owned 63% of the county of Sutherland.
Wow.
Which is massive.
That's hefty, isn't it?
Yeah.
Whew.
So they were doing this across their lands, and then they were buying more land so they could do more.
Yep. They went, hey, we're making a good buck here.
Yeah.
I'm getting through my mountains of debt. Arseholes.
Yeah. As the clearances continued, as you'd expect, some people started guessing that they were going to be evicted next.
Well, I mean, what's it called? You can see the winds are changing.
Yeah. So people were starting to make their own arrangements and were moving off the Sutherland estate before they were forced to leave.
I think that's what I do.
Yeah. Like some people were just making their own plans and leaving in their own time with no threat.
Yeah.
And just deciding to start new lives.
Because when you're just tenants, they wouldn't have anything to sell necessarily, that they couldn't just sell themselves.
Not particularly. And I think the Sutherland estate was buying cattle from them at this time, so they could sell them to the estate if they planned to move.
Yeah.
Now, confusion started and was sort of sown by Seller because he stopped being consistent in what he was ordering people to do, because he was telling some people they had to leave, but he was telling some people they were allowed to stay, or they could stay for a while. And it was a lot of mixed messages. So some people weren't leaving because they were seeing other people were allowed to stay. So it was confusing.
That's strange.
As the clearing continued, Sellor claimed that one of the issues that he and his men were facing was that they were turfing people out of their homes, serving them with eviction notices and telling them they had to leave. And then when Sellor and his men left, the families were returning to their abandoned homes and continuing to live there.
Oh. Okay, sweet, I'll take this money, bye. They'll never see me coming.
Well, I mean, it's such a huge estate. It's going to be a while before they come around again.
Yeah. Just squatting, isn't it?
Kind of, yeah. And there were squatters on the estate at this time. It's a different group to the tenants who were forced to move, but you had people who were living on the estate who weren't paying rent, and they were forced to leave.
Yeah.
But this claim from Sellor meant that the methods they were using to evict people changed dramatically.
Oh.
This was when they decided that it wasn't enough just to kick people out. They had to ensure that the home they were leaving behind was uninhabitable, so they couldn't come back. So they started removing the roof timbers of the houses.
Yes.
So you can live in them, which is horrific. And in June 1814, this evolved into just burning the houses down.
Straight up burning them down.
So the families couldn't come back. So remember you were saying you can see the ruins of the houses. This is why, because the roofs were destroyed and they were burned.
Yeah, that does make sense.
So it was just stone wall that was left.
I wonder if there was any just cheeky Highlanders who were seeing how many times they could be evicted. Like if they got money for being evicted to start their new lives, they'd just be in their house and Sellor or Young would come around, throw them out, like, okay, yeah, here's your like severance pay. Like, oh wow, this is horrendous. Thank you so much for like your generosity though. Like, oh, you're so welcome. And then they just leave and then just go to the next farm and just like muddy up their faces a bit and then just get re-evicted again because they haven't been keeping track.
Well, I don't know if they were paid to leave. There were, what's the word? Incentives for them to leave because they were offering them like new homes or new jobs or forgiving rent, lowering the rent. I don't know if they were paying them outright, that they would have to sell their livestock.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think that was more the system.
Probably to stop doing what I just suggested.
Maybe, yeah. In June 1814, Sellor was present at what became one of the most famous events of the Sutherland Clearances, which was when they tried to clear out the family of William Chisholm and his family. When they tried to clear out William Chisholm and his family. They set his house on fire, like they had been doing, which is just horrendous.
Totally chill.
But apparently, William Chisholm's elderly mother-in-law was still inside the home when they set it on fire.
Oh, no.
Now, James Hunter writes about this in his book. That's why we're not talking about every detail, because his book is better, and this isn't an episode about the clearances. And he's written a book about it. There's literally so much to discuss. But he claims that Sellor didn't intentionally mean for the woman to be in danger. They genuinely didn't know she was in there. But they were setting houses on fire. And Sellor apparently jumped into action, like ordering his men to remove her from the building once they learned she was still inside.
Yeah.
But it's still an awful thing to happen, and the optics of it are atrocious.
It's not good.
Because people watching it happen and hearing about it happen are focusing very much on the old woman trapped inside her home as it burns around her, and her family have been forced to leave.
Yeah.
And find new homes.
And it wouldn't have taken much to see if anybody was in there.
No.
It's not like these are big mansions.
No.
Like, these are often one room, maybe 2 or 3 rooms.
Well, if it's 2 rooms, the animals were living in one of them.
Yeah, like it doesn't... Just have a quick scan just to see if anybody's there before you light it on fire.
So, not good.
Yeah.
And the Chisholm's mother-in-law died about a week later. And the blame was placed firmly on Sellor.
Well, that's good.
That he had done this.
Because it should be.
Charges of culpable homicide and arson were brought against Sellor for what he had done and what he had ordered to be done.
Yep.
And it was Robert McKidd who charged him.
Oh, shit.
The local law officer that he had pissed off by catching him poaching.
Yeah, stick that up your salmon. Whap.
Robert got him.
He got him.
So how do you feel about Sellor's case? What do you think should happen and what do you think actually happened?
Well, I weirdly don't think he should be charged with arson because this is what they were doing. So it was obviously fine in every other case. Because if this was arson, then every other house they burnt down was arson.
But what if every other house was arson?
Then that would be fine, but I don't think it is in this case. It should have been, because he's burning people's house down. But through the eyes of the law, like they had agreed this was the process that was going to happen. But culpable homicide, definitely. However, I imagine he just gets off with it. Because it's atrocious that way.
Well, here's how it went. There were lots of reports in newspapers after this whole episode, depicting the clearances as horrendous and criticising the actions of George and Elizabeth.
Yep.
The ones behind it all, across Sutherland. And it was actually one of their relatives who was writing about them in these newspapers.
Oh,
a man called Alexander Sutherland. He didn't get one of the new leases on the land that he wanted while they were clearing it, so he started writing terrible things about them.
Oh, that's so horrendous. I was like, wow, he must actually have a conscience. No, he just didn't get to also profit. I shouldn't be surprised at this point.
No. In 1816, Sellor was acquitted. Kind of expected, like you said. It was hard to prove that he had intended to harm that woman. Because if there's any question of it being an accident, it's not murder.
Yes.
So they couldn't prove that he had done it on purpose.
I feel it was an accident, but it was negligence.
Yeah. I would fully agree. Like maybe they didn't intend to kill anyone, but they did.
Yeah.
He didn't have an easy time through the trial. The Sutherlands basically pretended that they didn't know him. And they didn't have anything to do with him in the trial going on.
Yep.
But when he was acquitted, they took full advantage of him being seen as guilt-free because it vindicated what they were doing and said, well, it's okay, he was acquitted.
Yeah.
So we're not doing anything wrong.
Funny how that works, isn't it?
Robert McKidd actually had to apologise and send what was described as a grovelling letter to Sellor for bringing charges against him. And Robert McKidd eventually left Sutherland altogether after everything had happened.
Yeah, I could see that injuring him to his soul.
Yeah.
Having to write that letter.
Especially if you genuinely believe that this man murdered someone.
Yeah.
And now you're having to write a grovelling letter of apology.
How many times? I'm sorry you're a murderer. Wait, no, that's not. Try again. I'm sorry you killed. No. This is hard.
That would be me.
Yeah. Sorry, you're such a twat. Okay.
Sellor and Young both left their advisory positions to Elizabeth. They weren't kept on.
I mean, that makes sense.
But Sellor stayed on the Sutherland estate, on his sheep farm.
Oh, because he bought one. Yeah.
So he continued profiting, even after doing what he had done.
Oh. I mean, he's got rid of all his neighbours who'd hate him, so...
Just sheep.
Just him and the sheeps. I believe that's the plural.
Famine struck through 1816 and 1817. So everything kind of halted because the Sutherland estate was preoccupied with providing for their tenants, which I think was what was required of a landowner at the time. If famine hit, they had to make sure their tenants were fed.
Oh, that's nice.
I think it was the policy.
Yeah.
So that's what they were doing. They weren't clearing people because they had to...
Feed them.
Yeah. You wouldn't think that would matter when they're moving everyone off, but that's what happened.
No. Do you think there was a famine because they got rid of everyone's farms?
I mean, there's a good chance. They've kicked everyone off the land, so the land's not being worked anymore.
Yeah.
And it would take a while to establish new farms.
Well, that's just it. Like, oh, no, you've got, new land. I'm like, okay, well, we're going to, kind of miss the growing season to get the land ready for growing.
Even that, they're moving to land that's closer to the coast. So I don't know if that's worse or better for farming.
Might be different soil and stuff, yeah.
It would take a while to get used to that. You might have to adjust the way that you farm it. Huge changes.
Could just be...
I don't know enough about it.
No, it could just be coincidental famine.
It could be, because famine did happen.
Yeah. Something else happened to the crops or...
Bad weather. It could be anything.
Yeah.
From 1818 until 1820, the largest clearances happened in Sutherland.
Okay.
And those who were working on Elizabeth's behalf to clear people were given very strict instructions on what they were allowed to do and not do after the whole saga with Cellar and the burning.
After the debacle.
Yes. They were told in no uncertain terms, basically, that nothing could go wrong. They couldn't make any mistakes. They couldn't do anything that would make them look bad because they were already getting hammered by the papers. So tenants were to be forgiven for any rent arrears that they had if they cooperated with the move. And they were promised that the new rents they would be paying would be as low as the estate could set them. So they would be paying less rent, and the rent they owed would be forgiven.
Well, that's a pretty good deal when you pretty much live and die by how expensive your rent is.
Well, I guess ultimately you would take it knowing I'm going to have to move. Like, they're not going to leave me alone.
Well, you either take the good deal now or kind of be dragged out kicking and screaming a year from now.
You know, there's still no choice, even though it's a good deal.
Yeah. Or whoever's in charge just comes up to you and goes, I will burn you in your fucking house.
Yeah.
And then you're just out. Like, ah!
But even with all these promises, it still wasn't the reality that people were moving to. The new homes that had been built weren't fit for purpose. They weren't built right.
I imagine they were quite thrown together.
Yeah, so they're moving into houses that don't work. The farmland, I read in a lot of places, it just wasn't good farmland.
Yeah.
So they couldn't make more money. It was so bad. And people were moving, like you said, like Canada, America. Some of them moved to South America from Sutherland. South Africa from Sutherland.
Oh, oui.
Choosing to start new lives rather than accept the new crofts they were being given. That's how bad they were.
Jeez,
they were taking their chances on these really long, dangerous sea voyages.
Mental.
About 425 families were moved off Sutherland lands in 1819.
Oh. That's so many.
And a further 522 families were cleared in 1820.
Oh, no.
That's thousands of people.
Yep. Oh. I imagine stepping it back, being moved on to terrible farmland. Imagine that just being like one of those bureaucracy things that just nobody's really thinking about it. You're just pointing to land and giving it. Like my brother got a dentist appointment like 6 months in advance, and it was on the Queen's Jubilee or the birthday, so he went along and the dentist was shut. So they gave him an appointment on a day they knew they were shut. So I can imagine this being like, oh yeah, sweet, that'll do, that's some good farmland. But this is a car park. This is just a gravel concrete car park. Not that there would be one then, but just that kind of thing. Like, how am I supposed to farm that? Like, oh yeah, that's just, we've got it on this piece of paper, that's your farmland. You're just going to have to make it work. Like, well, what is this though? Like, how? Well,
I think the basis they were going on was that they were trying to free up as large a tract of land as possible. So they were moving people as close to the coast as they could get them, but still, like, you know, not be on beach. And
yeah.
That was the plan.
There's some grass there. I'm like, yeah, but it's 80% rock. I'm like, well, just farm the bit that isn't rock. I'm like, what does that even mean?
As well, eat around it. Even though there were no more riots or anything throughout 1819, authorities who were acting on behalf of the Sutherlands were still setting houses on fire, even though they had been told not to.
That's arson. That's definitely arson.
And it looked even worse in 1819 to the observer, because when they were clearing people, there had been a long spell of no rain. So everything was really dry. Like, you know what I'm getting at here, because it happens every summer. Huge wildfires across the Highlands if it doesn't rain. And while this wasn't wildfires, the houses themselves were really, really dry.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just the roofs that were burning, it was the turf that made up the building's walls.
Jesus.
So the whole thing was alight, and it just looked like something out of a nightmare.
It would.
Having all of these houses across like whole hills ablaze and just spewing smoke into the air.
Well, it would probably be like a dark cloud of smoke. Proper like Mordor blocking out the sun.
And that's what they were doing.
Jesus.
The Observer newspaper wrote an article about this in 1819 and called it The Devastation of Sutherland. And they dubbed 1819 the year of the burnings.
I think that's entirely fair.
And when repercussions were supposed to happen to the people who were continuing to set these fires, the people doing it just said, oh, well, the families were coming back and rebuilding the homes, so we had to burn the whole thing down.
Did you?
We had to do it. If they just took it apart, they were rebuilding it. I don't believe it, because these people had nothing.
No.
But they're burning their houses down.
Not good.
No. This was a PR disaster for the Sutherlands, because they, in particular, Elizabeth and George, were widely criticised and shamed for what they were doing across their land. And this is me getting back to what we talked about at the start, because you were saying you didn't know that provisions were made for the tenants who were cleared off.
Yep.
Well, it turns out that the Sutherlands, even with this huge reputation, this really bad reputation that lingers now in this still the same area, that's where we live, they were treating their tenants better than a lot of the other landowners of the time.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, because not all of the landowners were buying their tenants cattle from them when they were evicted. Not all of the landowners even offered them alternative places to live, which the Sutherlands had done. They were just kicking people out of their homes, and where they went was their problem.
Horrendous. The Tory mindset.
So I don't agree with what the Sutherlands did. The Highland Clearances are fucking shocking.
Oh, yeah.
But I can concede that they weren't the worst.
Credit where credit is owed. They did some things better than others.
They were doing the bare minimum.
Yes.
I don't think they should be congratulated, but they weren't the worst of the bunch.
No.
But they got the worst of the public's ire, and they were the names known in the papers.
So weird how that can happen.
So they became the lightning rod for everyone's hatred of the Clearances. Now, Elizabeth got very frustrated with how the public was treating her and her family, because they were actually getting threatening letters sent to them anonymously as a result of the newspaper coverage.
Oh, damn. So that's quite an old practice, it seems.
Yeah. In 1821, one of the Clearances became violent, and the people who were living at Ackness and Askelmore were removed by force.
Oh, no.
And they lodged complaints with the estate about how they were treated, and an inquiry was held, and the estate was found to have done nothing wrong.
No, I never trust an inquiry.
No.
It's just...
Well, this was an internal inquiry.
Yeah.
So...
Further, we've decided we've done nothing wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, bye. Like, oh, wow, that's some justice for you.
George died at Dunrobin in 1833, but right before he died, like several months before, he was made the Duke of Sutherland, which made Elizabeth the Duchess Countess of Sutherland. And that's why they're best known for these titles, even though they didn't have them very long. Today they're known as the Duke and Duchess of Sutherland.
Yep.
Elizabeth died in her home near Hyde Park in London in 1839.
Oh.
And she received a very large, fancy funeral at Dornoch Cathedral, on the land where she had cleared so many people from their homes.
Ugh.
And throughout this time, when all of this was happening, she and her husband didn't actually live at Dunrobin full-time. They spent their summers there, and spent most of their time living in London. Now, what makes it all worse, and what you alluded to, is in 1837... I'm assuming at Elizabeth's direction, because she was still living, but her husband had died. A large monument was built on top of Ben Braggy, which is a large hill near Golspie. And this monument was built to honour the Duke.
Yeah.
It's a huge monument with a statue of him on the top, so that he could look out over his estate and what he had done.
Yeah.
Which, to me, is disgusting, and it shouldn't be there.
Nope. And that's how quite a lot of people feel. Yeah. Because periodically someone gets arrested for trying to blow it up or tear it down. Yeah.
A proposal was actually made in 1994 for it to be taken down. And suggestions were made that it could be replaced with plaques talking about the story of the Clearances and what happened to people.
That'd be a lot nicer.
It was even suggested that the statue just be moved, so it'd be taken down and placed in the grounds of Dunrobin Castle.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Since he owned it. That makes sense to me.
Fine.
And yes, someone tried to demolish it in 2011, but it didn't fall down. I'm pretty sure it was with dynamite. I'm pretty sure someone took dynamite to the statue. Yeah. There are several Gaelic songs about the Duke, none of them particularly complimentary. One of them, when you translate it into English, says, "First Duke of Sutherland, with your deceit, and with your friendship with the Lowlanders, it's hell that you belong. I'd rather have Judas by my side.
It's quite to the point, isn't it?
Yeah. So yeah, that's probably what most people know Dunrobin for. And certainly the Duke and Duchess of Sutherland.
Yeah, that's the first story I've known since starting this episode. I didn't know they were connected to that castle specifically.
Yeah, it's a huge part of Highland history. And if you go to primary school and things here, you learn about it when you're growing up.
Absolutely.
And I'm only just scratching the surface. I know I've said that a few times, but it's a huge topic on its own. And this is one estate. This isn't the whole Highlands, and this isn't the whole story. But we move on.
We're not at the present day yet.
Elizabeth and George's eldest son inherited when they died, because Elizabeth had the title for Sutherland.
Yep.
And he was called George, and he became the second Duke of Sutherland. Now, a duke is more senior than an earl.
Yes.
So they have that title now, so they go by duke, not earl.
Ah, okay.
They're different titles. He was dull. He lived down in England, he had lots of children, but he's the one who's responsible for how Dunrobin looks now.
Oh, okay.
He had the new palace built.
It is very much a palace, isn't it?
So this is when this happened. This was in the mid-1800s. That's when this happens.
Okay. Usually is. I feel there was a lot of castle restoration in the 1800s.
Well, it was fashionable. That's why it looks more like a French chateau. That's what he wanted, because it was in style at the time.
Yeah.
Now, his eldest son was also called George, and he became the third Duke of Sutherland. And he was educated at Eton. Naturally, he had a political career, as you'd expect, until his father died, and then he became the Duke. And he travelled a lot. He was actually present when Alexander II became Tsar of Russia.
Wow.
He was at that ceremony. And he was there when the Suez Canal was first opened.
That's pretty cool.
Which just seems bananas.
That does seem bananas. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Right?
Can't argue with that.
He was also in the military for a while, which was another thing that a lot of the later dukes and things, they were in the military and they were in politics. It's kind of expected from a noble son.
To be in the military, but never actually be in danger. That's the key.
You know what I mean? It happens over and over again. Now, one of the things that makes this George stand out, George III, is unfortunately scandal.
Uh-oh.
George had married a woman called Anne Hay Mackenzie, but I'm not sure how happy their marriage was, because in the years before she died, they didn't live together. They were estranged, but they didn't divorce. They weren't together. And George had a mistress that no one approved of and no one liked.
Uh-oh.
A woman called Mary Caroline Blair.
Was she a commoner?
Well, no. She was married into a pretty well-off family, but her husband had died in 1883, so she was a widow. But she had a lot of money. But there was a lot of speculation at the time and after, wondering if he hadn't just died, if he had either committed suicide or if she had murdered him.
Interesting.
A lot of people, it's just gossip. There's no proof or anything like that. But a lot of people talked about it at the time, wondering if she had killed him.
A bit of historical gossip.
Yes. But part of the reason there was scandal wasn't just the fact that George had a mistress. It was partly because he had married Mary less than 4 months after his wife Anne died.
It was Mary, his mistress?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh.
And the done thing was to wait at least a year.
Oh, I see.
Following the death of a spouse to get remarried.
Yeah.
That was like the societal norm.
The etiquette.
And although they'd been estranged, it was less than 4 months and he'd married her.
Oh.
It gets worse.
From George the Boring to George the Philanderer.
Well, his dad was George the Boring.
Yes, that's what I meant.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
George and Anne, his first wife, had several children together before he married Mary. So that's where his heir comes in. Several children. But none of them liked their new stepmother. She was widely hated.
Oh, no. Do we know why?
She just doesn't seem like a very nice person.
Well, that would do it, wouldn't it?
They didn't like that she'd been carrying on with their dad And there's things that she's about to do that made them dislike her even more.
And possibly killed her old husband.
You know, she's not a nice person.
Bit of a dick.
George and Anne's first son had died young, unfortunately. So it was their second son, who was called Cromarty. We finally have a different name.
I know.
He was set to inherit everything from his father, as is tradition.
As is tradition.
But the scandal continued.
Oh my God.
Because when George became ill at the end of his life, he surprised his entire family by trying to disinherit his children in favour of leaving his entire fortune to Mary.
What?
His new wife.
Can't be doing that.
Now, I think it's just the money, because I don't think he would be able to leave the title to her because of the male, the primogenitor.
That makes sense.
But he wanted to leave all of his money, everything, to her, and his children would get nothing.
Wow. Ooh, did he manage?
Well, he died. But it wasn't smooth sailing for Mary after this. Cromarty became the 4th Duke of Sutherland, because he's the eldest son.
Mm-hmm.
And although George had left all of these wishes for his fortune, Mary was found guilty of hiding and destroying documents in order to secure his fortune for herself.
I wondered if she was meddling.
Well, she was caught and she was found guilty of doing this after he died. And this was proven in court. She was charged, and she actually spent time in prison. She went to prison for 6 weeks.
Well, that's good.
For destroying documents and trying to steal his fortune.
What a batch. Mm-hmm. That is shocking. Shocking behaviour.
It took a while, but Cromarty and sort of the rest of the Sutherland family came to an agreement with Mary. Mm-hmm. And she did receive a financial settlement. I think they just wanted to settle the dispute. They didn't want anything to do with her at all.
I mean, that's fair. Take some money and just go and live out the last of your miserable days being miserable.
You know, they didn't want anything to do with her. So, right, fine. You can have some money. Mm-hmm. I just don't want to see you anymore. And it didn't go through until the early 1900s. It took several years for them to come to this arrangement. But Mary received a large financial settlement.
Oh, okay.
So much so that she was able to build herself a new castle.
A new castle? That's impressive.
Now, the Sutherlands are one of the most wealthy families in Britain.
Okay.
Have been for some time, continue to be at this point. Mm-hmm. So they have that kind of money. It was lucky that she was able to build herself a new castle, because one of the terms in this agreement they had come to was that she was no longer welcome on Sutherland land. Mm-hmm. She had to leave. They didn't want her living in the estate. That's how bad their relationship was.
Get the fuck off my land.
Like, at least hundreds, if not thousands of acres, and she's not allowed to live on any of it. So, Mary decides that she's going to build her castle on the edge of Sutherland land.
Yeah, I saw that coming.
This castle, it became known as the Castle of Spite. But its name is Carbistale Castle. I don't know if you know it.
I know the name, but...
That's why it was built.
Wow.
She had Carbistale Castle built, and the position it's in, I'm not going to get into it, but it's built basically on a hill. Mm-hmm. So it overlooks and can be seen from good portions of Sutherland land. And it's like by a railway, so whenever the Sutherlands were travelling south, they had to go past it. So they had to look at it.
Oh my God.
And there's a clock tower that's part of this castle, and it has 4 sides. And usually you would have a clock on all 4 sides.
Yep.
But at Carbistale, there's one side that's completely blank, and it's the side that faces Sutherland, because she didn't want to give them the time of day. I shit you not.
That is genius.
That is a grudge.
Oh. Just get a hobby or something. Like, why be so consumed with hatred like that?
Mistress Turd Nightmare.
Jesus. Well, that's something else. Who is that castle now, I wonder?
I haven't looked into it on purpose, because I definitely would have started talking about it.
Yeah.
And I need to not do that, because we're already 2 hours in.
We are.
So, not going to talk about it. But that's Carbistale Castle, and that's what happened to George's second wife.
So, meanwhile, Cromarty is just trying to be a duke,
Yeah,
presumably.
pretty much. He was also kind of boring. He was an MP, he was in the army, he went to Eton, he married a wealthy woman. And she was actually an Erskine of the Roslin Erskines.
Oh, yeah.
They appear now and again. And he started selling some of the family's property because he actually felt there was more money in Canada. So he started investing there and
Fair.
selling property across Britain.
Could have been. That makes sense.
Their son, or his son, George, became the 5th Duke of Sutherland when Cromarty died in 1913, so right before the outbreak of World War I. And George served during the war. He served in the Navy. And he actually offered up Dunrobin for use as a hospital.
That's nice.
During the war. It has the same plaque that Leith Hall has for being used as a hospital.
Yeah, there's a few castles that have done that. That's always nice.
And Cromarty had a yacht, the Catania, which was passed down to George. And George allowed this yacht to be used by the Navy. He'd initially said for it to be used to transport wounded soldiers home to be treated.
Fair play.
But it ended up becoming an armed vessel, and he actually served on his yacht as a commander.
Wow. Some size of yacht.
Yeah.
Very curious to see a picture of that. Gee, though. Well, that's pretty cool.
George also encouraged a lot of the people who were working for him on the estate to enlist instead. And one of the ways that he got people to do this was that he offered, and then did, pay the difference between what they were being paid at the estate and what they were being paid by the army.
Wow.
Or navy, or whoever they joined with. He made up the difference out of his own pocket to try and get people to sign up.
Jeez, oh.
In 1915, while it was being used as a hospital, a huge fire broke out at Dunrobin.
Oh no.
It seemed to be some faulty wiring that did it, but it was a major fire and destroyed a huge portion of the castle and the roof. Several of the firefighters who were called to help were injured while trying to rescue the building, but it seems that the soldiers who were recovering were all evacuated, so they weren't further harmed in any way.
Well, that's good, because that would be a damn shame.
Yeah, one of the firefighters fell through a skylight window.
Oh my god.
Like, bad.
That's dramatic, to say the least.
Yeah, this same George was super into film, in a big way. He was the first chairman of the British Film Institute.
Very cool.
Remember, movies are new at this time. It's 1915. Yeah, super into film. Invested a lot, patron of the arts.
That's nice.
Really enjoyed it. And he was in charge when World War II broke out. And Dunrobin was used as a hospital again.
Yeah.
It even played a part in one of the most surprising and secretive accidents of World War II.
Oh yeah?
I didn't know this before researching this episode, but Prince George, he was the Duke of Kent, and he was the brother of the king at the time. He was killed in an airplane crash while he was being taken to Iceland.
Oh wow.
As part of a mission. The plane crashed in the north of Scotland. There was an issue with the navigation system, so the plane went down and only one person survived. So the brother of the king was killed in a plane crash during the war.
Jeez, oh.
And after this happened, the Duke's body was taken to Dunrobin.
Oh wow.
And then the king was transported in secret because his brother had died.
Oh.
So he came to be with his brother.
Yeah. Oh, that's really sad.
But it was all very secret. No one knew about it at the time. He visited Dunrobin without anyone being any the wiser.
Wow.
Because that had happened.
Do you imagine for the staff at Dunrobin suddenly seeing the king?
Well, it was... A lot of people knew about it locally. It was local doctors and nurses who were called in to...
Of course.
Dress the body. I don't want to get too gnarly here, but, they're the ones confirming the death, treating him. And some of the people who were attending also helped when the fire broke out.
Jeez, oh.
So a lot of people knew in the area, but it was a national secret.
That's super interesting.
Right? Now, George had 2 wives, but no children.
What are we going to do?
What are we going to do? This is almost unheard of in this insane line of earls and dukes and what have you.
And a nephew, perhaps?
Well, he died in 1963, so we're getting into more recent history now.
Yep.
The title of Duke of Sutherland left his direct family.
Wow.
For basically the first time. It went to a distant relative called John Edgerton, because he was the closest male relative, and he was barely a relative.
I wonder if he knew he would get that, or if he found out when somebody told him, you're going to be the Duke of Sutherland. What?
Well, I don't know, because George didn't have any children, so I guess people would have looked into it to know where the title was going to go.
I guess so, yeah.
What's interesting is John only became the Duke of Sutherland. Mm-hmm. He didn't inherit Dunrobin.
Oh.
He got the Duke title, he didn't get the land. The earldom went to George's niece, Elizabeth Sutherland.
Another Elizabeth?
Mm-hmm.
So is she the third countess?
She is... Let me just check, because I'm going to talk about her in a bit. She's the 24th Countess of Sutherland.
Oh.
But she's not the Duchess.
Oh.
They're two different titles, and this is where it's split. Oh. So John gets the dukedom, but Elizabeth gets the land in Dunrobin.
I just choose the land in Dunrobin.
Well, she couldn't inherit the title because she's a woman. Mm-hmm. Even though she was George's niece, she couldn't inherit. So it went to this distant male relative.
In the 60s. Jeez,
Isn't that crazy?
Mental.
So... John Edgerton. We'll talk about him first, and we'll come back to the third Elizabeth of our story.
Johnny boy, yep.
Who inherited. John fought during World War II, and he was a prisoner of war for 4 years.
Ooh.
Which is incredibly difficult, no matter how much money you have.
Yep.
His family was already incredibly wealthy before he became the Duke.
Yeah.
I think his dad was a Duke of somewhere else, like Ellesmere or somewhere. I can't remember. Benjamin Disraeli, who was a UK Prime Minister, actually congratulated John's family at one point for their, quote, talent for absorbing heiresses, unquote.
Well, if that doesn't leave a sour taste in your mouth, what does? Ew.
Not good, eh?
Not good. Oh, that's grim.
It's just adding to their fortune by marrying well.
Icky.
But much like the Sutherlands have been doing for centuries.
If that's what your goal is, then that's a good way to do it.
Yeah. I don't have a lot of information about John because his life was so recent. Generally, when we're getting into the 1900s, there's not as much information because these people are either still living or recently died.
Yes, that makes sense.
But I do have two quotes that I think will make you kind of mad.
Okay.
And this is the first one. Estate duty forced the Duke to sell many pieces from the family's renowned collection of paintings and drawings. So this is when he became the Duke, I assume, because I assume that's why he had to pay estate duty. The family's wealth had shifted from landholdings to an estimated £120 million collection of paintings.
Wow.
Which included Raphael's, Titian's, Tintoretto's, Poussin, and a large part of the famous Orleans collection from the Palais Royal in Paris.
Jesus Christ.
So, yeah.
Well, that's just pretty chill, isn't it?
I have to sell some paintings to pay for my massive estate.
Oh, no. Gross.
Yeah, very gross. John died in 2000. So, sorry.
Before we get to that, there's a thing that wealthy people can do with paintings to dodge tax, where you can donate a painting to charity and the value of that painting gets taken off of your tax bill, basically. But because it's being donated and nobody has to buy it, the value can just be set. Because generally, the value is what someone will pay for it. So it'll go to auction, even if it's valued at $1 billion, and somebody only pays $10 for it. The value becomes $10. But there's these wealthy people who can pay experts to value these paintings. And they come in and say, oh, wow, this painting's actually worth hundreds and hundreds of millions, but it will never go to auction. And then they donate it, and then they get a much, much lower tax bill.
It's so stupid.
It's very, very stupid.
So stupid.
Anyway, it's a little tangent for you.
More financial advice?
What do you mean?
Well, in the first episode, you gave us a cracker, so...
Oh, yeah.
I'm glad that you're carrying on. We need this. There's a cost of living crisis. We need this information.
Yep, you need to be able to value paintings, and then, I think it's in America more, value paintings and then donate them.
John died in 2000, so not that long ago. And his son is the current Duke of Sutherland, Francis Edgerton, 7th Duke of Sutherland. And here's what I have for you about Francis.
Oh, no.
Which is also going to make you mad. In 2008, he sold Titian's Diana and Actaeon to the National Gallery of Scotland and National Gallery in London for £50 million. He ranked 107th in the Sunday Times Rich List in 2009, with an estimated wealth of £480 million in art and land.
What?
In the 2020 edition of the list, his net worth was estimated to be £585 million.
Oh, it's disgusting. Oh. No.
Do you think he's having to choose whether to heat his home or feed his children?
I should imagine so, yeah. He'll be struggling to get by. He would go well, the cost of fuel, £1.80. No chance, mate. I'm not filling up my 8 Range Rovers. And the Bentley. Gross.
That's all I really have on him.
Sounds like an arsehole.
Because he's the current Duke. He's still living.
Yep. He's just doing whatever Dukes do. Just swimming in all his wealth.
Yeah. So Elizabeth Sutherland, she's the one who became the 24th Countess.
Yes.
And our third Elizabeth to inherit as a female.
So funny. I wonder if it's become lucky to name your daughter Elizabeth.
Mate, I don't know. It's just... Because not all the daughters are called Elizabeth.
No.
But these 3 are. So she was George's niece, like I said. And she ended up being orphaned when she was 10.
Oh.
So, this is another Elizabeth who's inherited after being orphaned.
Oh, yeah. Weird.
I'm assuming because her father's dead.
Yes.
Anyway. Her dad died while hunting big game in Africa. He died of malaria.
Oh. Oh, there you go.
Hunting, well, you shouldn't be hunting really. I'm assuming it was lots of rhinos and...
Yeah, everything now.
Endangered animals.
Going extinct.
Her mother remarried. Her mother was American. She remarried, but she died 3 months later. So Elizabeth was left with no parents. And she came under the care of her Uncle George.
Is that as sinister as it used to be? I feel like if this is the 60s, then he's not going to force her to marry a 30-year-old.
No. It seems like they were pretty close.
That's nice, yeah.
It doesn't seem sinister that he took her in and cared for her because she was his niece.
Oh, that's nice. Because every other, ward ship...
That's true, yeah.
...has been horrendous throughout all the episodes and all of history. But I feel by the 60s, you can't really just become someone's ward and then just lock them up in your castle to steal all their power.
No, it seems... It seems fine.
That's nice.
All seems fine. She inherited from her Uncle George, and she dropped her many surnames because she was Levison, Gower, and all of that from the marriage of the Duke and the Duchess. She dropped them all in favour of just being Sutherland, making her the clan chief of Clan Sutherland.
Oh.
As has happened before.
I didn't know that meant anything in the 60s.
It's kind of defunct, but...
It's just a title, isn't it?
Prestige, because there are still clan chiefs.
I had no idea.
It is still a thing. You can look it up. There are still clan chiefs of the different clans.
I didn't know that.
But the country doesn't run on the clan system, so...
Yeah, it just doesn't mean anything.
It's like heritage.
Yeah.
So she went from Levison, Gower, Sutherland to just Sutherland. And after inheriting Dunrobin Castle, she actually had it used as a boys' boarding school.
Oh.
From 1965 until 1972.
Oh, there you go.
And she died quite recently. She died in 2019 in her home in London. And her funeral was at Dornoch Cathedral.
Wait, I'm getting deja vu.
Right. She married a man called Charles Jansen, who was a journalist, and they had several children, including their son Alistair, who became the 25th and current Earl of Sutherland. He was born in 1947. He was educated at Eton. But he was actually part of the Metropolitan Police for a while. And he worked for IBM.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
So he's had some jobs.
Yep, done a bit of work.
Now, sadly, we talked a little bit about this in the first part. Alistair's son died just a month ago.
Yeah.
He died in September 2022 after an accidental fall from a cliff in Thurso. He was an avid surfer, and it seems he just fell. So that was why we didn't visit Dunrobin for this episode, because it just didn't feel right.
Yeah, I think he was rock climbing, not surfing.
He may have been. He was. I think that's why they were in the area. Yeah, it didn't feel right to go because it just happened when I reached out about going. So, like, that weekend, it was awful timing. So, we decided not to. We'll maybe go another time when it feels a bit better.
I'd agree with that.
Less intrusive.
Uh-huh.
But we've made it to the present day.
Well, there we go. Here we are. Hello, present daily.
Now, this is when we talk about spooky stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But it just doesn't feel like enough after all of that history to now talk about ghosts, because everything was so dramatic.
It feels a bit strange, really, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. And I really only have one ghost story for you.
Yeah.
Out of that long, long history. There really aren't very many.
Mental. Maybe you don't need ghosts when the real life is as spooky as it is.
Maybe. I wonder if part of the reason there aren't many ghost stories from Dunrobin is they have tours, but there's only small parts of the castle that are open to the public. And I'm pretty sure it's all like guided tour, and certain rooms you can go in, or some you can only look in, you can't even go in. And you're not allowed to take photos anywhere in the castle.
Interesting.
So I wonder if it hasn't built up that same reputation as a lot of places because of that. Because not a lot of people are going into all the rooms and there's no photos.
Yeah, it also looks gilded rather than spooky when you see the castle. It doesn't give you spooky vibes. Maybe if it was dark and lightning was going, there would be. But
they look Frankensteinian.
Yeah.
Then. So yes, I have one ghost story for you.
Well,
it seems inadequate in terms of the balance, but there's all I could find.
It's like you've brought out a cheese board and there's one cheese slice in the middle.
Yeah. Or a single grape.
Yeah, one grape after our banquet.
Yeah.
I actually forgot to get cheese. I just have this leftover bit of cheddar.
Here's a dog biscuit.
Not coming to one of your dinner parties.
Well, the story is about a woman called Margaret Gordon, who supposedly was the daughter of the 14th Earl. And she made the mistake of falling in love with their stable boy at the time, a man called Jamie Gunn. Now, her father wanted her to marry someone of their standing, as you'd expect, but Margaret didn't want to, because she was in love with someone else.
Yep.
Her father found out about her love affair and was furious. He absolutely wasn't having it, because there was no way in hell his daughter was going to marry a stable hand.
No daughter of mine.
Precisely. So he decided, in his fatherly wisdom, to lock her away in one of the towers of the castle, in a room that's now known as the seamstress's room. And he banished Jamie from the estate, so they couldn't be together. Now, Margaret was not going to marry who her father wanted. She was determined. She threw a rope out of the window and decided she was going to escape and be with Jamie. She started climbing down, but her father caught her before she made it to the ground and demanded that she come back inside, because this was fruitless. She knew then that he was never going to give up. She was never going to get to be with who she wanted, so she let go of the rope.
No.
And fell to her death.
Sad.
And now lots of people have reported hearing Margaret wailing and sobbing in the seamstress's room, spending eternity mourning the loss of her great love. There's an alternative version of the story that suggests one of the Earls of Sutherland, it's not clear who, captured a woman from Clan Mackay because he wanted to marry her.
Yep.
She refused because she hated him. And she tried to escape using a rope made out of bed sheets. But the Earl discovered her during her escape and was so mad that she didn't want to marry him that he cut the rope.
Ooh. Can you imagine hearing a ghostly thud?
Oh, it'd be awful.
Yeah, like you're just walking around the grounds and then you hear a huge big bang of something hitting the ground.
Oh, that would be worse than the wailing, I think.
I think it would, yeah.
I will say, according to my research, which has been thorough at this point, the 14th Earl didn't have a daughter called Margaret.
Interesting.
I fact-checked. So I don't know about that one. But lots of people feel strange around the seamstress's room. I don't think it's a room you can go all the way in. I think you can only stand at the door. But I can't remember. But people feel really weird there, and people have heard crying from in there when it's empty. And in different rooms of the castle, ones that don't have any stories attached to them, people feel sick or they feel dizzy. They just feel a bit off, rather than seeing things or hearing things. It's a sensation that people get.
Interesting.
Which, given the history of the place, is kind of compelling to me. That you just have all of these weird feelings. You just don't feel right.
Yeah.
I find it kind of compelling.
It never does anything to me, because I feel you always have a range of feelings flowing through your body, and then you just associate them with where you are, and then kind of invent it. Oh, I'm feeling like queasy all of a sudden. I bet that's because I'm in this room where this person tragically met their end.
But this is happening in rooms where there's nothing.
Yeah. I'm just a ham sandwich. I'm not going to...
I know, we're not going to agree. But I just want to remind you, this isn't just in the room that has the ghost story. This is just in the castle, in different rooms. And I doubt everybody's going to know everything we just talked about.
Well, no. I feel I've forgotten half of what you just talked about.
Don't say that. But that is the story of Dunrobin Castle.
Oh, whew. I am glad we split this into 2 parts.
I'm exhausted.
I feel if this had been one sitting, I don't know how much I'd have to give at this point.
Well, we've been recording for 2.5 hours.
And it was 1 hour and 3/4 on Wednesday, a couple of days ago.
So that's over 4 hours.
Yeah.
As promised.
As
I
promised.
put it up on Instagram.
It would have been 4.25 hours of Dunrobin Castle-y goodness.
We can't do that to you guys.
No.
It would just be torture.
I hope you've enjoyed it over 2 parts, though, because I was saying I think part 1 was my favourite episode so far.
Which makes me all warm and fuzzy inside.
It's just so interesting. And such a varied history. But we won't get into it. You've been here long enough.
Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much.
We will be back next week, as normal, with the episode that was going to come out this week.
Our true episode 8.
Yes.
This can be episode like 7.5. 7 part 2.
We could call it 7.5.
Yeah, that might work. And we will see you for the next episode. Or over on Patreon for the Blether, which we shall record right now.
The Blethers get released on Mondays. We have the book club over there that comes out on Wednesdays. And you get early access to all our episodes. So you'll get us on Thursday instead of Friday.
It's pretty sweet.
So we will see you over there.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.